Harrington Foundation Gala was not supposed to change my life. It was just another job, another 4 hours invisible behind a camera lens, documenting champagne flutes and handshakes, and the specific way that very wealthy people smile when they know they're being photographed. I had done dozens of events like it. I was good at them, and then I did something I cannot fully defend, except to say that the room was dim, and the man had his back to me, and he looked exactly like someone I trusted completely. I should back up. Gavin and I had been dating for 3 months when his family's foundation hired me to photograph their annual gala. He'd suggested me to the event's coordinator himself, gently, without making a thing of it, the way he did everything. That was Gavin, steady, quiet, the kind of man who held elevator doors for strangers and remembered how everyone in his office took their coffee. We met at a gallery opening in Soho that January, when he'd stopped in front of a photograph I'd taken, a long exposure shot of the Brooklyn Bridge in a winter storm, and said, barely above a whisper, that he felt like he could hear the wind in it. Nobody had ever said anything like that about my work before. I talked to him for 2 hours without noticing the time. 3 months later, he still texted me good morning. He still listened with his whole body turned toward you, the way people rarely do anymore. He was good and honest and uncomplicated, and I was building something with him that felt, for the first time in a long time, like solid ground. There was one thing I hadn't quite figured out yet, his twin brother. Gavin had mentioned Asher carefully, the way you approach a topic that carries weight. They were identical, same height, same build, same dark hair, and angular jaw that must have gotten them mistaken for each other constantly as kids. Gavin ran the operational side of Harrington Capital, the visible face of the family's private equity and real estate business. Asher ran everything else. The acquisitions that happened without press releases. The deals finalized at midnight with attorneys on standby. The parts of the business that kept the Harrington name on buildings all over Manhattan without anyone quite knowing how they got there. He's not like me, Gavin had said once, and I heard the neutral care in it. Just be careful around him, okay? I filed that away. The gala was at a rooftop venue in Midtown, the kind of space that costs more per hour than most people make in a month. I arrived early to scout angles, met the event's coordinator, and spent the first 90 minutes doing exactly what I was paid to do. Documenting a room filling up with people in black tie, who all seemed to know each other in the layered, complicated way that old money does. Gavin arrived at 8. He caught my eye from across the terrace and smiled, that quiet, specific smile he seemed to save for me, and mouthed later. We had a rule at events. I was working, he was attending. We kept it professional until I wrapped. It worked for us. We also had a game. It started on our second date, at a Brooklyn farmer's market. I'd lost him in the crowd and spotted him 10 feet away with his back to me, studying a display of heirloom tomatoes with the concentrated attention he brought to everything. I crept up, covered his eyes with both hands, and whispered, "Find you." He'd laughed and reached up to hold my hands against his face before turning around. After that, it became ours. Whenever we were somewhere together and I could catch him unawares, I'd sneak up. He started anticipating it, sometimes pretending not to see me coming just to let me have the moment. It was small and private and completely ours, the kind of ritual that belongs only to 2 people and means nothing to anyone outside of it. Sometime around 10 that night, I spotted him near the bar at the far end of the rooftop. His back was to me, dark suit, dark hair. Same broad shoulders I'd recognize anywhere. The crowd between us was navigable. I had 5 minutes before I needed to get back to the main room for the foundation remarks. I slipped through the crowd. I transferred my camera to one hand, raised the other to cover his eyes from behind, leaned in close, and whispered, "Find you." 2 seconds of absolute silence. Then he turned around. The face was identical. I mean genuinely, disorientingly identical, but the expression was completely different. Where Gavin would have been laughing before he even fully turned, this man was perfectly still. His dark eyes found mine with a precision that felt less like surprise, and more like he had been waiting for something interesting to happen, and had just found out what it was. "Guess again beautiful," he said, low unhurried, a voice with an edge beneath the silk. I stepped back so fast I almost knocked into the person behind me. My free hand flew to my mouth. The heat came up instantly, crawling into my face before I could stop it. "I am so sorry," I managed. "I thought you were. You look exactly. I'm the photographer, I'm not. I'm so sorry." "Asher." He extended his hand with the composure of a man who had never once been caught off balance in his entire life. "Asher Harrington. And you must be Blair." I shook it, because refusing would have made everything worse. His grip was firm and warm, and he held it one beat longer than necessary before letting go. "Gavin's mentioned you," he added, something unreadable moving through his expression. "I'm going to go disappear into this crowd now," I said. The corner of his mouth moved. Not quite a smile. That would be a shame. I retreated to the main room and spent the next 20 minutes documenting the foundation remarks, while my face slowly returned to normal. Gavin found me during the cocktail hour afterward, took one look at me, and said, "What happened?" I told him, quietly into his shoulder, still mortified. He was quiet for a moment then. Was he strange about it? He was the opposite of strange. That was somehow worse. Gavin pulled back to look at me. Something had shifted in his expression. Not quite worry, but adjacent to it. "He liked you," he said. "If he wasn't weird about it, that means he liked you. With Asher, normal means he's already thinking." He paused. "Just stay away from him tonight, okay? I know that's a strange thing to ask." It wasn't strange. I did it, but I could feel Asher's attention for the rest of the evening like a frequency. I couldn't tune out, steady and directional, present whether I looked toward him or not. Over the following 2 weeks, I told myself it was nothing. An embarrassing accident that would eventually become a funny story. The time I snuck up on my boyfriend's CEO twin at a midtown rooftop gala and whispered a private joke in his ear. Hilarious. I'd tell it at dinner parties someday. Except I couldn't stop thinking about the way he'd looked at me when he turned around. Not shocked, not embarrassed on my behalf. Just interested. Like I had handed him a piece of information he intended to use. My best friend Jules put it in plain terms over coffee on the Lower East Side the following Thursday, the way Jules always did. "You're describing a man who made you feel more in 3 seconds than your actual boyfriend has in 3 months," she said. "That's the part you won't say out loud. That's completely unfair to Gavin." "Is it untrue?" I looked at my coffee. Blair. It's not that Gavin doesn't make me feel things. He does. He's thoughtful and steady and good to me in ways I've never really had before. He's exactly what I convinced myself I wanted. Jules set down her cup. "Convinced yourself," she repeated. "Don't do that. I'm just using your words. You're the one who has to interpret them." The text started that weekend, an unsaved number I somehow knew immediately. Clean and direct, no preamble. "Your photo from the gala was in the Foundation newsletter. The long exposure of the skyline. It's exceptional." I stared at it for a full minute, put my phone face down, went to bed. The second one came 2 days later. "I have a project that needs a specific eye. I'd rather work with you directly than go through an agency." The third 4 days after that. Patience isn't something I practice for many people. I deleted all 3 without responding, which felt like a decision and also, somehow, like the wrong one. Things got more complicated when my agency booked me for a corporate headshot session at Harrington Capital's Midtown offices. I almost called to decline. Then I thought about how backing out, because a man made me nervous, was not something the version of myself I respected would do. Asher wasn't supposed to be there that afternoon. He was. He passed through the lobby while I was setting up, stopped, looked at me for exactly 3 seconds with that same unnerving calm, and said my name like he'd been expecting me. "Mr. Harrington," I said, even professional. The corner of his mouth moved. "Call me Asher." "I'm here for the headshot session." "I know," he didn't move. "Are you good at your job?" It was such a direct question that it wrong-footed me entirely. "Yes." "Then I'd like to talk to you about a project. Something more long-term." He glanced at my camera bag, not through the agency. "I'm booked out pretty far." "I haven't told you what it is yet." Still. Something recalibrated in his expression. Not frustration. Something more like adjustment. "You're careful," he said, as if noting a fact. "That's going to make this either harder or more interesting. Possibly both." He walked away before I could respond. The moment I can't fully justify, the one I've gone over more times than I can count, happened 3 weeks after the gala on a Sunday afternoon. Gavin was stuck in a meeting that had run long. I was at a coffee shop in the West Village, editing on my laptop, when my phone rang. Not Gavin, not Jules. Asher. I answered because I was tired of managing his existence, like it was something I had to protect myself from. I want to talk to you, he said, in person. One conversation, real, no maneuvering. I tell you what I actually think. You tell me if I'm wrong. If I am, you won't hear from me again. I shouldn't have said yes. He was already there when I arrived, no jacket, sleeves pushed up, looking oddly more human than he had at the gala. He didn't waste time. You covered my eyes that night and it was automatic, he said. 3 months of habit with Gavin and your body just moved. He held my gaze. And then you pulled back and your face did something that had nothing to do with embarrassment. I was embarrassed. You were also something else. I looked out the window at the street. Blair, not a rebuke, a request. I'm not playing a game. What I do is recognize what's real and move toward it. And something about you has been real since you stood behind me with your hands over my eyes and said, "Find you." A pause. I keep thinking about how that was meant for him, and felt like it was meant for me. The thing about Asher was that he said exactly what he meant. No softening, no social performance. Just the thing itself, placed on the table. I was not accustomed to it. "You're his brother," I said. "I know. No apology in it. And Gavin is a good man. I'm not going to sit here and undercut him, but you're not in love with him. Maybe you'd get there eventually, with enough time and safety." His eyes held mine. "Is that what you actually want? To get there, maybe?" "Not everything has to be immediate and overwhelming." "No," he agreed. "But you moved to New York at, 23, with a camera and savings you'd built yourself, because you refused to take the safe internship. You turned down a contract last year, because you didn't want to shoot what they needed you to shoot." He paused. "You photograph storms, Blair. You don't actually want careful, you want true." I stood up. This was a mistake. "Sit down, not a command, please." I sat down. I was angry at myself for sitting down. "Just answer one thing," he said, quieter now. "When you covered my eyes that night, those 2 seconds before you realized, what did it feel like?" The answer came before I could stop it, like finding someone. The words sat between us, irreversible. Asher was quiet for a long moment. When he looked at me, something in his expression had shifted, the composure still there but the armor behind it, gone. "I know," he said. "I felt it too. I told Gavin that evening. Not everything, not the West Village, not what I'd said, but enough. Something is happening that I didn't choose, and I'm trying to stop," I said. "I need you to know because I can't not tell you." He went very still in the way that Harrington men went still, inward, compressed, nothing performed. "He reached out to you," he said, "not a question." "Yes." "And you talked to him?" "Yes." He stood by the window of his apartment and looked out at the Hudson for a long time. "I warned you," he said finally, "not because he's dangerous the way people mean when they say dangerous. Because he's the kind of man who makes everything else feel like background noise." He turned. "Is that what's happening?" "I don't know what's happening. That's what I'm telling you." "How much time do you need?" I crossed the room toward him. "Gavin, you have been nothing but honest and kind. You are the best version of steady I have ever had. But you deserve someone who isn't standing here, telling you she needs to figure something out." Something broke slightly in his face, controlled but visible. "Then say it." I said it, as carefully and honestly as I could, that it wasn't only about Asher, it was about the gap I'd been quietly aware of for weeks, the space between caring deeply for someone and being fully, entirely there, that I was sorry, that he deserved someone who came home to him without wondering. He nodded once. "Okay," he said, "just that." I left and cried in the elevator, alone, for the relationship and for his face, and for the strange cruelty of wanting the right thing and having it still feel like loss. Jules showed up at my apartment that night with a bottle of wine and her trademark unsentimentality. "You did the right thing," she said. "It doesn't feel like anything yet. Give it a week." What if I'm wrong about all of it? What if this is just? What if it's the forbidden thing and nothing more, and I've blown up something real for? Blair, she set down her glass. You moved to this city alone. You turned down the safe contract. You have never once chosen easy when it actually mattered. She met my eyes. The question isn't whether Asher is worth it. The question is whether you're willing to find out. 3 days later, Constance Harrington called me. I'm not calling to make you feel guilty, she said, before I could speak. I want to tell you something. She told me about a summer when the boys were 9. Little league tryouts, 2 roster spots. The coach had taken Asher aside. More natural talent, but the team needed Gavin's steadiness at second base. Asher had listened, said nothing, and spent the following week coaching Gavin in the backyard every evening after dinner. Quietly, privately, without telling anyone. Gavin made the team believing entirely in his own effort, which was exactly what Asher had intended. He never told Gavin, Constance said. He never told anyone. I only know because I watched from the kitchen window. I was quiet. Asher is not easy, she continued. He never has been. He carries weight that Gavin doesn't have to carry, and it's made him sharp in ways that can look like coldness, but the people he actually chooses to let in. She paused. He doesn't do that often. The fact that he has been patient through this tells you something I wanted you to have. Constance, I said carefully, are you telling me to choose your other son? I'm telling you, she said, that my sons are different in ways that go much deeper than birth order, and only you know which difference matters. She hung up before it could become anything else. I sat in my apartment surrounded by contact sheets and light panels, and the accumulated evidence of a career I had built entirely on my own terms. And I knew what I wanted. I had known it since the West Village, maybe since the Gala, maybe from the moment a stranger turned around in a crowded room and said, "Guess again." Beautiful, and looked at me like I was the most interesting problem he'd encountered in years. I texted Asher, "We need to talk." His response came in under a minute. "I know, come over." His apartment was on the 38th floor of a building near Flatiron, all glass and clean lines, and a view that made the city look like something you understood, rather than something you were surviving. He let me in, poured 2 glasses of wine without asking, and waited. I ended things with Gavin, I said. Something moved in his expression. Not triumph. I'd been watching for it. Something quieter. The specific look of someone who has been certain about a thing for a long time and has just been proven right about it. How is he? Asher asked. Hurting, handling it, which might be harder to watch than anger. He'll be okay. He handed me a glass. Gavin is resilient in ways I've never managed to be. It's probably what I've envied about him most. I looked at him. You envy him? He knows how to let things go. A pause. I don't. When I hold on to something, I hold on. His eyes found mine. I've been holding on to the memory of a woman who covered my eyes at a gala and said, "Find you like it was the simplest, most obvious thing in the world. For 6 weeks, Blair." That's a lot of weight to put on a 2-second accident. It wasn't an accident for me, he said. Whatever it was for you, however it started, it was not an accident for me. I set down my glass, took 1 step toward him, then another, and then I kissed him, deliberate and fully chosen, nothing accidental about it at all. He kissed me back, and it was entirely different from anything I'd been comparing it to in my head. Not careful, not gentle in the way that cautious things are gentle. Present, both of us entirely in it at the same time, and I felt the past 6 weeks of resistance break open into something that finally made sense. When we came up for air, he pressed his forehead against mine, and didn't say anything for a moment. Blair, he finally said low, like a confirmation. I know, I said. This is going to be complicated. I know that too. It was complicated. Nothing about choosing Asher was simple. Gavin was controlled and civil at the Sunday dinners. Constance refused to stop hosting because she believed in family meals with the conviction of someone who'd seen what happens when you stop. His politeness toward me was entirely justified and harder than his anger would have been. Leonard Harrington, the family patriarch, a man who spoke rarely and meant everything he said, assessed me at the first dinner with a gaze that weighed things and said, eventually, "I've looked at your portfolio. You have a strong eye. It was, apparently, high praise. Asher protected me without being asked and without making a show of it. When the social circuit gossip started, and it did quietly at first and then not quietly, he was surgical about it. A business introduction rescinded here. A phone call made there. I told him he couldn't manage perception through force. "Watch me," he said, which became something between an inside joke and a promise. What I hadn't expected was how much I would come to understand him in the quiet parts. The way he read, voraciously, annotating margins in his handwriting, philosophy and history and financial texts he'd already mastered, revisiting them anyway. The piano in the corner of his apartment, that he played badly and stubbornly, without any apparent intention of getting better. The way he called his mother every Sunday morning, before anyone else was awake. "You're not what I thought you were," I told him one evening, both of us on his couch with the city lit up behind us. "What did you think I was?" "Dangerous." "I am dangerous in it, just fact." "You're also someone who coached his brother in secret and calls his mom every Sunday," I said. "Both of those things exist at the same time." He looked at me for a long moment. "You notice too much." "It's the job." "No," he shook his head, "that's you." The shift with Gavin came slowly and then all at once, the way most things do when you stop forcing them. 5 months in, he found me alone at one of Constance's dinners, really approached me, not the controlled politeness he'd been maintaining, and said quietly, "He's different with you. I don't love it. But I can see it." "Gavin." "Don't." He shook his head. "I'm not looking for an apology. I'm telling you I can see it." He paused. "We're going to be okay, eventually." And then he walked away. Later, Asher found me by the window. What did he say? "That you're different with me." He was quiet for a moment. "Is that a problem?" I looked at him, the man who ran an empire from the 38th floor, who had been patient for 6 weeks when patience cost him something, who had turned around in a dim room at a charity gala and met my eyes and decided, in that instant, that I was worth the trouble. "No," I said, "it's the whole point. Some accidents break something open that needed to be opened. Some mistakes are just the universe's version of find you, delivered without your permission, in a crowded room, on a night you thought you knew exactly who you were reaching for." I reached for the wrong twin that night. I'm not wrong anymore.